Hello everyone, my name is Logan. Welcome back to the lecture hall. Today we're covering section 3.2, the product and quotient rules. So let's start by looking back at what we know from last video. We know we can add and subtract derivatives, but can we do that with multiplication and division? Well, let's see. Let's start with multiplication. And you guys are smart. You probably know. If there's a whole section dedicated to this, you probably can't, but let's just try it out. So, if we have our functions, they must both be differentiable. So x and x squared both differentiable, so we get f prime of x is equal to 1, g prime of x is equal to 2x, because f of x equals x, g of x equals x squared. So, what is the derivative of f of x times g of x? Well, in order to see if both are the same, you have to do the derivative of this whole thing, and you have to multiply, and then you have to multiply the two derivatives together to see if they get the same thing. So you do f prime of x times g prime of x, and you get 2x, right? But then if you take the derivative of f of x times g of x, if you take the derivative of this, you get, power rule, and you get 3x squared. So we see that they are not the same. We see 3x squared is not equal to 2x, obviously, that makes sense. So we realize that you can't just multiply two derivatives together in order to get another correct derivative. So this gives light to the product rule. And it states if f and g are both differentiable, then the derivative of f of x times g of x is equal to f of x times the derivative of g of x plus g of x times the derivative of f of x. And so in high school I learned a pretty good way to remember it. Shout out Miss Lobs. She was a great calc teacher. And it goes first d last plus last d first. So it's first, and then d is derivative, last, g of x, plus last d first. So it's just a pretty easy, it rolls off the tongue, First d last plus last d first. It's pretty easy. So that gives light to the power rule. So let's go back to these, and let's find the proper derivative. Let's find the derivative of f of x times g of x. Which is equal to, first, so x times the derivative of g of x, which is 2x, plus g of x, x squared, times f of x, f prime of x, which is 1. And then you get that 2x squared plus x squared, which is equal to 3x squared. And would you look at that, of course, I erased it, but that is what we got when we multiplied the two functions together and then took the derivative. So we know it holds. So now let's start on to division. And you probably know from the product rule and the name of the section that there's going to be a quotient rule. So let's just try it out and then do the quotient rule. Okay, now on to the quotient rule. So we're going to do the same thing we just did, where we check to prove that you can't just divide the two, because it would be way easier to just divide the two, but it's not going to be the case. So we have f of x is equal to x squared, g of x is equal to x, f prime of x is equal to 2x, and g of x is equal to 1. So we know f of x over g of x is equal to x, right? That's easy, x squared over x, easy. So then you take the derivative of this, and you get 1, right? Okay, that's not too bad, that makes sense. But then, is it the same as taking the derivative of f prime of x over g prime of x? So you have f prime of x, which is 2x, over g of x, which is equal to 1, so that equals 2x. And as we predicted, they're not the same. So it shows you can't just do the derivatives for the 2 and just divide them. You can't do that. But that gives light to the quotient rule. So if both f of x and g of x are differentiable and g of x isn't equal to 0, like if your function, because g of x is equal to 0 is a function, it just can't be that function because, you can't have things over 0. So we get this. The derivative of f of x over g of x is equal to g of x times the derivative of f of x minus f of x times the derivative of g of x, and that's all over g of x squared. So, in high school, we learned another thing from Miss Lobs, and it goes low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. So, you have your low because g of x is on the bottom, d for derivative high. High because f of x is on top, so low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. So it's squared on the bottom, L squared. So you can look at it as L dh minus h dl divided by L squared. So that's one, I'd say, pretty easy way to remember it. And essentially what this is doing is it's the denominator times the derivative of the numerator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, all divided by the denominator squared. And so that's a lot to take in, but just remember this. You can also see it in the form, this is a little bit easier to digest because there's a lot less going on. G of x, f prime of x minus f of x, g prime of x, all divided by g of x squared. That gets rid of the ddx's because those are kind of annoying, and that would be another way to look at the quotient rule. So, how would we put this into practice? Let's see. Alright, so we have our rational function, y is equal to x squared plus 6x over x to the fourth plus 2. So we can look at the x squared plus 6x as our f of x, and our x to the fourth plus 2 as g of x. So what's the derivative? Well, we know it's low d high minus high d low, right? All over low squared. That's a good way to remember it. Low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. Sorry. Yeah, alright, weird. So let's do it. So it's x to the fourth plus 2, low, derivative of high, x squared plus 6x, well that's power rule, 2x plus 6, right, minus high, x squared plus 6x, d low, what's the derivative? Well, power rule, so then you have, well, what's the derivative of this? You know, it's going to be 0, and then x to the fourth is equal to 4x cubed from the power rule, right? Divided by the square below, and then you get x to the fourth plus 2 squared, right? I'm not going to factor this out. It takes too long, and it's really, you need to see the process. And also, this does depend on the teacher, of course. Sometimes the teacher will say simplify it. Other teachers, the cool teachers, are the ones that say, as long as you show me that you know how to do the quotient rule, you don't have to simplify this. I think it's always better safe than sorry to simplify, but that can also, you can also make mistakes easily doing that. So simplify at your own discretion. Alright, so for the last part of the lecture section, we're going to be covering the things you just need to remember. And when I say you need to remember, you don't have to, but it'll make your life a hell of a lot easier. So, from the last two lectures, we've learned that the derivative of a constant is equal to 0. Whoops, didn't finish the 0. The derivative of a polynomial is of x to the n is equal to n x to the n minus 1. power rule. The derivative of e to the x is equal to e to the x. The derivative of a function times a constant is equal to a constant times the derivative of the function. The derivative of f plus g is equal to the derivative of f plus the derivative of g. The derivative of f minus g, same sort of thing, is equal to the derivative of f minus the derivative of g. And then the last two things that we learned today from the lecture today is the power rule and quotient rule, or product rule and quotient rule. And it's the derivative of f times g is equal to f times the derivative of g plus g times the derivative of f. So first d last plus last d first. And then the derivative of f divided by g is equal to g times the derivative of f minus f times the derivative of g divided by g squared. Low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. So these are really important. Just remember them. No questions asked. But now, that's all for the lecture portion of the video. Suggested homework will be in the description. Let's transition into some questions. Alright, so now onto the questions. We're going to be doing number 5 and 12. Well, one quotient rule, one product rule, just so you guys get a little bit more experience with it. So, let's start with the quotient rule problem. So, we have low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. Alright, so when you write it out like that, it kind of makes it easier, because you know, okay, I just have to kind of do what it tells me to. You just remember the formula. It's pretty easy. So, we have f of x, right, is our x. G of x is our e to the x, right? So it's low, well, e to the x. D high, well, what's the derivative of x? 1, so it's times 1, minus, well, high, well, that's x. And then the derivative of low, what's the derivative of e to the x? E to the x. And then we all divided by, well, low squared, which is e to the x squared. So then that is equal to saying e to the x minus x e to the x all over e to the 2x. And so you could factor out an e to the x and all that stuff. Don't worry about it. Or well, on your test, worry about it, but I'm not going to do it right here because that's algebra and this is a calculus course. So now onto the product rule, number 12. 1 minus e to the x times x plus e to the x. So what was it? First d last plus last d first. Right? Well, I should probably just put f's instead of 1's because it makes more sense. So first d last plus last d first. Well, so it's first 1 plus e to the x d last. Well, what's the derivative of this? It is x, so 1. The derivative of x is 1 plus derivative of e to the x, which is e to the x. So then you just have 1 plus e to the x, right? And then so now plus last x plus e to the x times the derivative of f and times the derivative of the first, which is 1 minus e to the x. Well, so what's the derivative of 1? 0. And then what's the derivative of e to the x? E to the x, we've been over this. So then you can't forget the minus sign, so you have 0 minus e to the x, which is just equal to e to the x. So our final answer is 1 plus e to the x squared, because that's 1 plus e to the x, 1 plus e to the x, plus e to the x, x plus e to the x plus go. That is how to do the product rule, quotient rule. Just remember, low d high minus high d low divided by the square below. I'm sorry, I just really like saying that. And then first d last plus last d first. Just remember those, and the quotient and product rule will be actually quite simple. So, my name was Logan. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.